So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine you spend like 20 years building just a spotless reputation.
Oh, yeah. Decades of hard work.
Right. You work late, you mentor junior colleagues, you build this thriving business, and you are universally respected in your community.
You're at the top of your game.
Exactly. And then one evening, you're tired, you're frustrated about something, and you fire off a single, impulsive, like 15-second post on social media.
Uh-oh. We all know where this is going.
Yeah. By morning, those 20 years of goodwill are just entirely gone. Poof.
It's terrifying how fast it happens.
It really is. Because usually when we think about what defines our lives, we picture these massive cinematic crossroads.
The big moments.
Right, we expect the huge monumental choices like moving across the country, changing careers, getting married, to be the things that make or break us.
But that's not actually the reality for most of us, is it?
No, not at all. And that's exactly why we are taking a deep dive today into a stack of historical research, linguistic commentary, and ancient text that completely shatter that idea.
Yeah, we're looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 10 today.
And I have to say, if you are expecting some lofty, abstract philosophy that just kind of floats in the clouds, you are in for a serious shock.
Oh, absolutely. It is remarkably grounded.
The mission for today's deep dive is to explore how this 3,000-year-old text proves that the nitty-gritty daily decisions, the small mistakes, and our invisible everyday behaviors actually dictate our outcomes far more than any grand sweeping life event ever could.
And, that phenomenon you mentioned, the 15-second mistake destroying a 20-year legacy, it feels incredibly modern to us.
Right, because of the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the sources we're looking at today prove it is anything but modern. Traditionally attributed to Solomon, this specific chapter of Ecclesiastes targets a psychological trap that is, well, it's practically wired into human nature.
Which trap is that?
It's that lie we constantly tell ourselves. Oh, it's just a small thing. It won't matter.
Oh, man. Yeah, we excuse the little lapses in judgment all the time.
Right. But the core argument established in the historical commentary surrounding this text is that wisdom isn't some, reserve tank you tap into for the big moments.
It's not just for crises.
Exactly. It's entirely about the compounding, almost chemical-like effect of our daily, seemingly insignificant choices.
Well, let's jump right into the historical context of that chemical effect. Because the imagery in verse 1, it does not pull any punches.
It really doesn't.
It says, dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor.
Such a visceral image.
Dead flies in the ointment. On the surface, it sounds like a minor annoyance, right? Like finding a hair in your soup.
Yeah, you just pick it out and keep eating.
Right. But the research on ancient apothecaries paints a much, much more destructive picture than just a minor annoyance.
Oh, completely. The mechanics of ancient perfumery changed the entire meaning of this verse.
Oh, so?
Well, in the ancient Near East, an apothecary's ointment wasn't just, a cheap lotion from the drugstore. We are talking about highly valuable substances.
Like luxury goods.
Very much so. These were olive oil bases infused with rare, super expensive spices, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon.
Stuff that had to be imported, probably.
Exactly. And the process involved boiling and steeping these ingredients over months. It was a massive investment of time and capital.
Okay, so it's a huge deal.
Right. So when a fly lands in that warm, sweet-smelling oil and dies, it doesn't just sit there suspended in amber.
Ew. Okay, what happens?
The fly's body begins to decay, introducing foreign bacteria right into the organic oil base.
Mm-hmm.
And because the oil is sealed and stored, that bacteria triggers a fermentation process.
Wait, it literally ferments.
It literally does. It causes the expensive perfume to putrefy, bubble, and release this foul, rancid gas.
Oh, wow.
The chemical composition of the entire batch is irreversibly corrupted. It's ruined.
So it's not an aesthetic flaw. It's absolute contamination.
Precisely.
It's like getting a single drop of bleach on your absolute favorite black shirt.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right. The shirt is 99% structurally fine. The fabric isn't torn, but you can never wear it to a nice dinner again.
Yeah, it's done for.
The utility of the entire garment is destroyed by one localized chemical reaction.
And the translation to human behavior here is severe, but it's really accurate.
How does that apply to us today?
In our modern context, this translates to the reality that one careless ethical compromise at work, or, one lie on a tax form, or one fleeting moment of cruelty can entirely corrupt decades of building a good reputation.
Because people can't unsee it.
Exactly. The value is destroyed because the tiny flaw fundamentally changes how people perceive the whole.
But let me push back a little here, because reading this can induce, like, a lot of anxiety.
I can see that.
Is this ancient text telling you and me to be perfectly paranoid? Are we supposed to just walk on eggshells every single day, terrified that one tiny misstep, one metaphorical fly is going to obliterate our entire lives?
It does sound stressful when you put it that way.
It feels incredibly unforgiving, almost like a demand for absolute perfection, which is impossible.
Well, what's fascinating here is what the commentaries highlight about that exact fear.
Okay, what do they say?
The text isn't advocating for paranoia, it's advocating for self-awareness regarding our internal standards.
Meaning what exactly?
The underlying mechanism of human behavior is that our actions are rarely isolated events. People reveal themselves through their microhabits, and patterns eventually expose character.
So it's not just a one-off mistake.
Right. Carelessness, even in really small ways, almost never stays small. It quietly compounds. A little folly isn't usually a bizarre, out-of-character freak accident. It is almost always a symptom of a relaxed internal standard. When you tolerate a few flies buzzing around the workshop, eventually one ends up in the vat.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if a relaxed internal standard and small mistakes can ruin our efforts, it kind of forces us to look at the underlying system of how we are applying our effort in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. We have to look at the setup.
Are we setting ourselves up for these mistakes by how we work? And the text gets incredibly practical about the mechanics of labor.
Yes, verse 10.
Yeah, I'm looking at verse 10 right now. If the iron be blunt, and he do not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength. I gotta say, this reads remarkably like an early critique of modern hustle culture.
It really is. Hustle culture is essentially the modern disease of the blunt iron.
Seriously?
We have built an entire societal framework around the idea that brute force and endless hours are the ultimate virtues.
Society today basically tells you, just push harder, grind. If you aren't succeeding, it's just because you aren't working 80 hours a week.
Which is such a toxic mindset.
But the physics of a blunt axe completely dismantle that logic. When you swing a dull blade at a tree, you aren't cutting the wood fibers. You are basically trying to shatter them through blunt force trauma.
And that takes a toll on the worker.
A massive toll. The shock wave of that impact travels straight back up the handle into your own hands, your arms, your joints.
Yeah.
You are physically destroying your own body to get a worse result.
And the causality of burnout is perfectly captured in that shock wave. Lack of preparation makes everything exponentially harder and more damaging to you.
Yeah.
Taking the time to whet the edge, to strategize, to rest, to learn a new skill, to plan your approach, that feels like a delay to someone infected with hustle culture.
Because you aren't doing anything.
Exactly. But preparation and skill reduce unnecessary struggle. The sharpness of the tool does the work, not the exhaustion of the lumberjack.
Now, I saw in the historical research that this idea connects to another verse earlier in the chapter. Verse 2 says, "A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's at his left."
Yes, this is a very misunderstood verse.
Because to a modern ear, that just sounds like a bizarre comment about handedness. Like, sorry, lefties.
Right, it sounds like discrimination against left-handed people.
But historically, in the ancient Near East, the right hand was the universal symbol for strength, skill, and proper direction, correct? While the left implied clumsiness or wandering off course.
You've hit on a crucial piece of cultural context there. It's not about being literally right-handed. It is a metaphor for how you apply your heart.
And heart meant something different back then too, right?
Yes, in ancient Hebrew thought, the heart represented your mind, your will, and your intentionality. It was your control center.
Okay, so how does that connect to the hands?
The right-hand application means you are acting with deliberate skill and strategy. The left-hand application means you are just flailing blindly.
So it's really about direction over intention. You can mean well, and you can be incredibly busy. You can be working those exhausting 80-hour weeks, putting in maximum physical effort. But if your heart is at your left hand, if you are moving in the wrong direction without a strategy, it is entirely wasted energy.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Effort without strategy is just a blunt iron bouncing off a tree trunk.
And the wisdom is profitable because it directs the effort. It aligns your energy with reality instead of fighting it.
So sharpening the axe takes care of your internal preparation and your personal energy.
Right.
But even with a perfectly sharp axe, you don't swing it in a vacuum. You are swinging it in a highly unpredictable environment surrounded by other people, complicated systems, and hierarchies.
Which is where things get really messy.
Exactly. Which brings us to the text warnings about sudden conflict and hidden dangers. The text gives these really vivid
Yeah,
scenarios.
the pitfalls and the snakes.
Right. It says if you dig a pit, you might fall into it. If you break a hedge, a serpent might bite you. And then there's this highly specific scenario in verse 4. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses.
The situational awareness demanded in these few verses is staggering. Let's look at the spirit of the ruler first, because this is honestly a masterclass in emotional regulation during a crisis.
Let's do it. Think about the modern workplace equivalent of this.
Oh, there are so many.
The spirit of the ruler rising up is basically receiving an angry, aggressive, and completely unfair email from your boss out of the blue.
We've all been there.
Your heart rate spikes. The natural instinct is to impulsively hit reply all with a defensive, heavily worded rant to prove you are right.
Of course you want to defend yourself.
You want to leave your place, metaphorically speaking, abandon your professional composure, and fight back to defend your ego.
And that impulsive reaction is the exact mechanism that turns a spark into a forest fire. The logic of yielding pacifieth great offenses is profound, but it is often deeply misunderstood in our culture.
Let me challenge the text on that, though. Doesn't yielding just make you a doormat?
I hear that a lot.
If my boss sends an abusive email, or if someone publicly attacks my character, yielding feels like surrendering my dignity. How does this ancient advice differentiate between strategic emotional regulation and just like letting a toxic authority figure walk all over you?
Well, there is a massive psychological difference between surrendering your dignity and strategic de-escalation.
Okay, explain that.
Notice the text specifically says, leave not thy place. It's not telling you to run away or to cower in a corner and apologize for something you didn't do.
Right.
It is telling you to hold your ground emotionally. When you react with unbridled anger to authority or to conflict, you lose your internal footing. You abandon your strategic, rational position and enter a chaotic emotional brawl where the person with more positional power will almost always win.
It's like hitting the brakes when your car fishtails on an icy road.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yet your natural panicked instinct is to jerk the steering wheel in the opposite direction to fight the spin. But any driving instructor will tell you that fighting the spin just flips the car.
You have to go with it.
Yielding, in this context, is strategically steering into the skid. You aren't surrendering to the ice. You are moving with the momentum just long enough for your tires to regain traction so you can safely steer out of danger.
That physical mechanism maps perfectly onto human psychology. By maintaining your composure, staying in your place, and steering into the skid with a calm, measured response, you diffuse the immediate emotional volatility of the ruler.
You regain traction.
Exactly. You stay in control of yourself.
And if we look at those other metaphors, the serpent in the hedge and digging the pit, we shift from navigating visible conflict to navigating invisible risks.
The historical context of the hedge is vital here to really get what's going on.
Break it down for us.
In ancient Middle Eastern agriculture, property lines and vineyards weren't separated by, manicured green bushes like we have today.
Right, like a suburban fence.
No, they were separated by dry stone walls. These walls provided deep, cool, shaded crevices in a scorching climate. Naturally, venomous snakes, vipers, specifically, would nest inside the cracks of these walls.
So if you were tearing down a wall or breaking through a hedge and you just blindly shove your hands into the rocks without looking?
The viper strikes.
Right.
The danger was always there. It was just hidden within the structure. And the psychological equivalent today is modern corner cutting.
Like at work.
Yes. Think about the safety protocols at a construction site or the compliance regulations in a finance department. Those rules often feel incredibly tedious.
Like an annoying stone wall blocking your path to finishing the job quickly.
Exactly. And bypassing that protocol feels like a brilliant shortcut in the moment.
You break the hedge to save time.
But you don't see the structural risk, the serpent hiding in the branches of that decision. The consequences of corner cutting are almost always hidden until the exact moment they bite.
That makes total sense.
When you ignore a small financial discrepancy because dealing with it is inconvenient, or you skip a critical safety check, you are actively creating invisible risk. The problems build quietly in the dark before they become catastrophically visible.
And if invisible risks eventually become visible, the absolute fastest catalyst for bringing them to light is what we say.
Without a doubt.
Actions have hidden consequences, but words travel at the speed of sound. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at verse 20.
This one is so relevant.
The text says, "Curse not the king, no, not in thy thought, and curse not the rich in thy bedchamber. For a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter." Thousands of years ago, this text essentially predicted the mechanics of screenshot culture and leaked private messages.
Isn't that wild? The authors recognized a fundamental truth about human social networks that we often forget in the digital age. Nothing is truly contained. The ancient courts had complex gossip networks, servants, and spies. A whisper in a bedchamber was currency. Today, our gossip networks are just digitized and infinitely faster.
We even still use the phrase, "a little bird told me."
Yes.
That idiom literally traces its roots back to the cultural imagery of this exact text.
Right.
But why do we curse the king in the bedchamber in the first place?
Because we need an outlet.
Right, we do it because we crave a safe space to vent. You fire off a private Slack message venting about an unreasonable client, assuming it's an encrypted, impenetrable vault between you and a coworker.
And we operate under the psychological delusion of privacy. We assume that because we feel isolated in the moment of speaking or typing, the words themselves are isolated.
Which they aren't.
Not at all. The text repeatedly warns that foolish speech causes tangible geometric harm. It notes elsewhere that the beginning of a fool's words is foolishness, but the end of his talk is mischievous madness. Gossip and anger escalate. They demand an audience.
And suddenly, that private Slack message is forwarded or screenshotted or accidentally projected onto a conference room screen.
The bird of the air carries the voice.
The realization you have to come to is that you should speak, type, and post as if absolutely everything is already being broadcast on a billboard. Words possess the terrifying power to build trust over decades or dismantle it in a millisecond.
Which really forces us to ask a much larger question. If our words are hidden shortcuts, our poorly directed efforts, and our tiny flaws have this much power to dismantle our lives, we have to look at the underlying system that governs all these behaviors.
So what does this all mean? We have summarized a significant amount of incredibly practical, ground-level advice from the Bible today.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We've talked about dead flies fermenting valuable ointment, the physics of sharpening blunt iron, steering into the skid of an angry boss, vipers in dry stone walls, and birds carrying our leaked group chats.
It's quite the list.
It is. How does all of this actually connect to a deeper spiritual reality? Because this isn't just a secular self-help manual on how to be a more efficient middle manager. It is fundamentally a piece of spiritual wisdom.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the biblical text, we see that this practical wisdom is the very foundation of spiritual discipline.
How so?
The historical commentary links the themes of Ecclesiastes directly to broader spiritual truths found throughout the wisdom literature, specifically the Psalms. For example, Psalm 1 contrasts the fool, who is like chaff blown away by the wind, with the wise person, who is like a tree planted by streams of water.
Okay, think about that tree. A tree doesn't make a single massive decision to grow 50 feet tall.
No, it doesn't.
It makes millions of microscopic daily decisions to draw water from the soil. The roots just sit by the water, consistently taking in nutrients day after day.
And that is the daily discipline we are talking about. The direction you choose in the mundane moments determines your ultimate spiritual outcome.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, Psalm 15 asks the question, "Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent?" And the answer isn't someone who performs grand cinematic miracles. Right. The answer is the one whose walk is blameless, who speaks the truth from their heart, and who casts no slur on their tongue.
It's the person who guards against the dead flies and the leaked words. And Psalm 141 is literally a prayer asking God, "Set a guard over my mouth, Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips."
We have a profound tendency to compartmentalize our faith. We think God is only interested in our Sunday morning worship or those massive dramatic life events we talked about at the beginning of the deep dive, like who we marry or what city we move to.
The highlight reel.
Exactly. But the summary of this biblical wisdom is that God cares deeply about the micro moments. How you respond to a frustrating colleague, whether you prepare diligently for a meeting, how you handle a small ethical dilemma when no one is watching. These are the actual arenas of spiritual formation.
It's like building physical muscle. You don't walk into a gym on day one and try to deadlift 500 pounds.
You would crush your spine.
Yeah.
You literally would. You start with the small weights, lifting them consistently every single day, building the microscopic muscle fibers.
And applying this practical wisdom directly strengthens your trust and your relationship with God because you are trusting His framework for reality.
Wow.
By practicing discipline, by strategically guarding your words, and by seeking His direction over your own blind, blunt iron effort, you are actively aligning your daily steps with His will.
Instead of just relying on yourself.
Right. You are submitting to the reality He created rather than relying on your own left-handed, flailing foolishness. Faithful note of the small, mundane things builds a deep, resilient trust in the divine process.
And that changes how you view the future, doesn't it?
It does. When you trust God with the daily inputs, the sharpening of the axe, the guarding of the lips, you stop stressing so much about controlling the massive outcomes. You leave the outcomes to Him. That is an incredibly powerful paradigm shift. To summarize today's deep dive into the Bible, Ecclesiastes 10 proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the small choices handled well or handled poorly shape your life far more than the dramatic blockbuster moments.
Absolutely.
It is the daily discipline of drawing water. It is taking the time to sharpen the iron so you don't destroy yourself with the impact. It is steering into the skid when conflict arises, and it is meticulously keeping the flies out of the ointment.
And before we close, the text leaves us with one final haunting image regarding the mechanics of failure.
What's the image?
Verse 18 says, "By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through."
A decaying building, the roof sagging, eventually collapsing.
Yes. In ancient architecture, a flat mud brick roof required constant seasonal maintenance. If you ignored a small crack before the rainy season, the water would seep in, compromise the structural integrity of the walls, and the entire house would cave in on itself.
So it's not a sudden earthquake.
No. The architectural reality points to a profound life lesson. Destruction almost never comes from a dramatic, swinging wrecking ball. Usually it comes from quiet, invisible neglect. It is the roof leaking drop by drop because someone decided it wasn't a big deal to fix a single tile.
A house dropping through just from idleness? That is a sobering thought. The wrecking ball is the exception. The leaking roof is the rule.
So the question for you to mull over as you go about your week is this. What relationships, what health routines, or what spiritual responsibilities in your life are slowly deteriorating right now simply because you are choosing not to maintain them?
Reflect on the blunt iron sending shockwaves into your arms. Think about the hidden vipers resting in the dry stone walls, and the flying birds carrying your private frustrations to the public square. Visualize that single drop of bleach permanently altering the fabric of the black shirt and the dead flies fermenting the valuable ointment. Look at the small, mundane moments of your day and ask yourself, how will you apply this information in your life?